as my sister has introduced, my name is Fatih Istanbullu. I am from Istanbul, Turkey. I'm here this evening to represent Mr. Harun Yahya. He's an Islamic scholar from Turkey. He has written more than 300 books so far. Some of his books are about the collapse of the theory of evolution. Some of them are about faith, politics, and science-related topics. But he pays a special attention to the theory of evolution. At the end of this 1 hour, we will understand why he does that, hopefully. Harun Yahya's website, harunyahya.com, is visited by millions of people from 172 different countries. So feel free to take a look whenever you have time. I'm going to start this talk with a short movie.
A person growing in the universe he lives in will encounter 250 billion galaxies, each the home of about 300 billion stars. Every one of these magnificent systems operates in accordance with specific laws and in a particular order. There is a plan, a design, and a balance in every part of the universe. The Earth occupies a minuscule part of this vast universe, and it too has a perfectly designed system incorporating extremely complex and delicate balances. Unlike any other known heavenly body, its atmosphere and its surface support life. Water, which covers the biggest part of the Earth's surface, is one of the basic elements of life. The temperature range, orbital properties, and surface of the Earth all demonstrate that this planet is specifically designed for life. This unique planet of ours is the home of an incredibly complex and comprehensive vitality. Millions of different plant and animal species live on Earth in perfect harmony. This harmony is so perfectly established that it is capable of surviving intact unless deliberately intervened in by human beings. But how did these systems and living things originate? When living things on Earth are examined, a manifest design is to be observed. Every living thing is furnished with extremely complex systems that enable it to play its role in the overall system to the best of its ability. Since life is planned, designed, and organized, it certainly must have a creator. And that creator has been introducing himself to mankind since the beginnings of the world. He is Allah, the one and only God, who created the heavens and the earth from nothing, and who fashioned everything therein.
So the theory of evolution, which was advanced in the 19th century, denied this obvious fact of creation. According to the theory, living species and living beings were not created by God. Instead, they evolved from one another, from a common ancestor in millions of years of time. Charles Darwin, when he published his book called Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, he did not talk about any kind of scientific evidence to his theory. All he had was his assumptions and imaginations. However, the ideas of Charles Darwin were accepted in England quickly and in the rest of the world soon after, not because the theory was scientific, but because of the ideology that it carried behind it. And that ideology was the denial of the existence of a creator. As a result of this today, we have two explanations of how life emerged. One, theory of evolution. Two, creation. There is no third alternative explanation. And this is also accepted by leading evolutionists today. One of them is Douglas Futuyma. He says organisms either appeared on Earth fully developed or they did not. If they did not, they must have developed from pre-existing species by some process of modification. if they did appear in a fully developed state, they must indeed have been created by some omnipotent intelligence. Douglas Futuyma says that they either appeared fully developed with their full complexity, or they did not. They evolved. But if they did appear in a fully developed state, they must have been created by some omnipotent intelligence. This is exactly what we are going to do tonight. We are going to show you the invalidity of the theory of evolution with the modern findings of science by asking 3 questions to the evolutionists while showing the fact of creation. Now, those 3 questions are the following. Number 1, how did life originate on Earth? Number 2, what are the mechanisms of evolution? And number 3, there must be a vast amount of fossil evidence of evolution. Are there any such fossils? So let's evaluate these questions one by one. Question number 1, how did the first living cell form? If you ask this question to one of the most prominent evolutionists, such as Richard Dawkins, he's going to say he doesn't care how the first living cell formed or how it started. He studies afterwards. Science does not work this way. You have to explain how the first living cell is formed scientifically before you start explaining millions of years of time. I'd like to give you an example here. The picture that you are seeing belongs to a modern city. When we look at this picture, what we see is a stadium, high-rise buildings, highways, bridges, security systems, lighting systems working in harmony so that we can live comfortably in such cities today. We don't think once upon a time a tornado took place in this location and or earthquakes took place in this location, and in millions of years of time, this is the result. No, we automatically think that when we look at this picture or when we look at the view of a city, that this city is organized, planned, constructed, engineered by people who have intelligence. Let's compare a modern city that we have today to a living cell, a single living cell. The most modern city we have today is extremely primitive in terms of the complexity when you compare. To make a comparison, the city also has power stations, factories, a huge data bank, storages, high-tech refineries, and the security systems that lets what's good for the cell in and stops what's bad for the cell at the door. So just like we cannot think that a modern city cannot be result of coincidences, as theory of evolution claims, a living single cell also cannot be result of coincidences. Another interesting one is this picture that you will see. This belongs to a computer which has the fastest processor and the hugest amount of storage available to humanity. If you pay attention, the storage units occupy the entire floor. Let's compare this best computer with the hugest amount of storage to the DNA molecule located in one cell. DNA molecule is the molecule that has the information belongs to our bodies. From the color of our eyes to the structure of our organs is coded in this 4-letter giant molecule. If we were to write down the information located in one DNA chain, in one cell, it would take approximately 1 million pages. We have 100 trillion cells on our bodies. 100 trillion times 1 million pages is how much information we have. It's impossible for this structure to come into existence by chance, as theory claims. Mathematicians calculated that a DNA chain small enough to fit onto a teaspoon has the capacity to contain all the information of all the books ever written. It's unimaginably complex. It does not occupy the entire floor. You know the size of it? It's 1,000th of a millimeter in size. And the cell is 100th of a millimeter in size. And the proteins Every single cell produces approximately 2,000 proteins every second. They calculated the odds of a single protein to come into existence by chance, and they came up with this number. 1 chance in 10 over 950. In statistics, it's calculated that any possibility lower than 1 chance in 10 over 50 is accepted as impossible. We're talking about 1 chance in 10 over 950 here. It's impossible times impossible times impossible. And even if you have the protein, let's accept for a second that we have a single protein, we need another protein. We need enzymes, we need DNA, we need RNA, we need the entire cell for it to function properly at the same time, at the same place. This is not enough. You have to have 100 trillion cells for a human being. And even if you have all these systems, you can think of a person who just died, for an example. That person has everything necessary for life. 100 trillion cells, all the organs, heart, brain, but the person is dead. You know why? Because there is no life. If there is no life, the cell will not function, even if it exists with its full complexity, somehow. The owner of life is Allah, is God. Charles Darwin says this: if it could be demonstrated that any complex organ existed which could not possibly have been formed by numerous successive slight modifications, my theory would absolutely break down. He says this, and we show you just that. One single eye. One eye has 40 different components in it. Each of those components have to exist at the same time, at the same place, for one eye to function properly. Each of those components have hundreds of parts in it. If you take any of those, eye will not function properly. For an example, if you take cornea out, it will not function properly. If you take retina out or lens out, it will not function properly. They have to exist at the same time, at the same place. And Charles Darwin makes this comment on the eye. To suppose that the eye, with all its inimitable contrivances for adjusting the focus to different distances, for admitting different amounts of light, and for the correction of spherical and chromatic aberration, could have been formed by natural selection, seems, I freely confess, absurd in the highest degree. Of course, a single eye requires the power of Allah and the creation of Allah. It cannot gradually evolve from primitive to more complex. The complexity of the eye has to exist at the same time, at the same place, for it to function. The more primitive levels would be a disadvantage rather than being an advantage for the organ. Let's do an experiment together here. Let's imagine that we have a barrel in the middle of this room, and let's put any chemical we find into this barrel, or any protein we find in nature, and buy those proteins from the stores and put it into this barrel. Let's heat this barrel up, if you like to, or let's cool this down. Let's call every single evolutionist scientist around this barrel from all around the world. Let them consult with one another. Let them pass this experiment on to the next generation, even though they have intelligences. Let them have the time they need. At the end, tiger, butterfly, dog, cat, and all the other insects, and all the other living beings and species will not come out of this barrel. None will come out. Life belongs to Allah, and very basic rule in biology classes that they teach is that life, all the life forms we know come from another life form. And the originator of the life is the owner of the life, which is God, Allah. Fred Hoyle explained this in a very good way. He says that the chance that higher life forms might have emerged in this way is comparable to the chance that a tornado sweeping through a junkyard might assemble a Boeing 747 from the materials therein. Boeing 747 requires intelligence, engineering. He continues, he says, indeed, such a theory that life was assembled by an intelligence is so obvious that one wonders why it's not widely accepted as being self-evident. The reasons are psychological rather than scientific. This is exactly what it is. The reasons are ideological rather than scientific. I will talk more about these ideologies at the end of this talk. Let's go to question number 2. What are the mechanisms of evolution? Let's say somehow we have this cell, as they claim, the fully functioning cell. In the primitive Earth conditions, this complex cell came into being. What mechanism exists in nature that can turn this cell into a variety of different species? Well, their explanation is the first one, natural selection. What's natural selection? Natural selection is that, let's say there is a herd of deer here and they are threatened by predators. When this happens, the deer will start running. The ones who run faster, the ones who are stronger, will be able to escape and survive. The ones who are sick, handicapped, or the ones that don't run as fast will be captured by predators and eliminated. This happens all the time. This is true. But no matter how much process goes with this, the species of deer will not turn into a species of another stronger species, such as horses. Natural selection has no power to increase the information located in DNA so that another species can emerge in time. Natural selection will enable nature to have stronger living species. That's it. Natural selection has no consciousness to do this. It's impossible to increase the information in organisms' DNA so that a species can develop another organ that didn't exist before. Charles Darwin was very aware of this, and he said natural selection can do nothing until favorable variations chance to occur. And this is why neo-Darwinists had to add another mechanism to the theory, and that's called mutations. What are mutations? Mutations are the changes in organisms' DNA through mostly external effects, such as X-rays, chemicals, and ultraviolet radiation. 99% of the mutations are harmful, which means it only destroys what's present. 1% is neutral. There is no beneficial mutation in nature. If you like to know the effects of mutations, you can study Nagasaki, Hiroshima, or Chernobyl. After these events took place in these locations, have you heard any scientists saying, any evolution scientists, who believe that mutations diversify the living species and made them better species in time, saying that, let me go to, for an example, Nagasaki and Hiroshima and get mutated, and maybe I will develop wings. No. What did they do? Everyone escaped out from these locations. Why? They know that mutations are harmful, that's why. There is no beneficial mutation exists, not one single of them. 99% harmful. And these are the effects of mutations in human beings. Handicapped, sick human beings. These are the results of mutations in animals. It turns a perfect species into a freak of nature. A third leg sticking from the back of the cow. Another leg doesn't function. These are the results of mutations. For almost 50 years, scientists tried to create a different species of fly. They did experiments on fruit flies. They wanted to basically create a single different species of fly through beneficial mutations for almost 50 years. Results, however, were always handicapped or dead fly at the end. What they wanted to do, basically, create a fly, different species of fly. Let's look at our book, Quran, what Allah says about this, inshallah. Mankind, an example has been made, so listen to it carefully. Those whom you call upon besides Allah are not even able to create a single fly, even if they were to join together to do it. And if a fly steals something from them, they cannot get it back. how feeble are both the seeker and the soul. The creation of a single fly requires the power and the wisdom of Allah. Again, let's summarize why mutations are not an evolutionary mechanism. Number one, the direct effect of mutation is harmful. Number two, mutations add no new information to organisms' DNA. Number three, in order for a mutation to be transferred to the subsequent generation, it has to have taken place in the reproductive cells of the organism. And let me give you an example of this. If I stay under the sun, my skin will get darker. This is adaptation. This happens all the time. This happens within the limit of the organism's DNA, within the limit of the information located in the organism's DNA. But no matter how much darker my skin gets, my baby will not born with a dark skin. You know why? Because those changes do not take place under the reproductive cells. In the time of Charles Darwin, they thought that these changes are transferred through blood. But today, we have a whole new branch of science called genetics. These changes transfer through our genes. And my skin getting darker, these kind of changes do not take place in the reproductive of our cells, in my genes. This is why mutations have no power for evolution. This is Richard Dawkins. He is the militant atheist, one of the most prominent Darwinists today. This is the chief of Darwinism. He's going to be asked to give a single example of any kind of evolutionary mechanism that can increase the information in organisms' DNA, which is fundamentally needed for evolution to take place. So let's see how he answers this.
Professor Dawkins, can you give an example of a genetic mutation or an evolutionary process which can be seen to increase the information?
I remind you one more time, he is one of the most prominent evolutionists and militant atheists today. He does not have a single example. He says, can you stop while I think? If evolution would have taken place, he would have hundreds of thousands of these examples. In another interview, he's going to be asked how life could have emerged or started. And let's see what a very respected scientist of our day has to say about this.
By a very slow process.
Well, how did it start?
Nobody knows how it started. We know the kind of event it must have been. We know the sort of event that must have happened for the origin of life.
What was that?
It was the origin of the first self-replicating molecule.
Right, how did that happen?
I totally don't know.
So you have no idea how it started?
No, nor has anyone.
Nor has anyone else. What do you think is the possibility that intelligent design might turn out to be the answer to some issues in genetics or in evolution?
It could come about in the following way. It could be that at some earlier time, somewhere in the universe, a civilization evolved by probably some kind of Darwinian means to a very, very high level of technology and designed the form of life that they seeded onto perhaps this planet. Now, that is a possibility, an intriguing possibility. And I suppose it's possible that you might find evidence for that if you look at the details of biochemistry and molecular biology. You might find a signature of some sort of design.
Wait a second. Richard Dawkins thought intelligent design might be a legitimate pursuit?
And that designer could well be a higher intelligence from elsewhere in the universe. But that higher intelligence would itself have had to have come about by some explicable, or ultimately explicable process. It couldn't have just jumped into existence spontaneously. That's the point.
So, Professor Dawkins was not against intelligent design, just certain types of designers, such as God. So the Hebrew God, the God of the Old Testament, he doesn't exist in your view.
But what he did is that he gave a possibility to the existence of aliens who could have seeded life on Earth. But he did not accept that God could have created life on Earth. This is exactly what it is. It has nothing to do with science. It has everything to do with ideologies. Darwinism is another religion. It has nothing to do with science. Have you ever heard a question? Do you believe in gravity? No, you never heard this. Why? Because you know gravity. It's scientifically proven. The reason why you are hearing, do you believe in evolution, is because it's another religion. That's why. Science does not work this way. It's another pagan religion. Life, like I said, comes only from life. Scientists quit trying to create a living cell from inanimate matter. You know why? Because they understood it was impossible. But the theory of evolution claims that this happened millions of years ago. A living cell came into being by chance. Something that, with the technology that we have in the 21st century, scientists could not have done, happened by chance, with random mutations and natural selection. This is very irrational.